who do you want to be, and the choice that you and I both have in that decision over who we show up as, over how we actually live every single day of our lives, and the fact that we have way more power than we likely realize than we probably are even giving and affording ourselves. And the reason why I was thinking about this was this morning, I had a moment with a friend of mine, and I felt a little funny about it. I felt a little bit off, and it started making me feel I started kind of shutting down and started closing up. And in that moment, I realized, it was like I remembered, oh, I get to choose. I get to choose who I want to be in this moment. I get to choose how I want the rest of my day to go. Like, it was early in the morning, 9 or 10 o'clock. And so basically I had the choice then, right then and there, about how the rest of my entire day would it go. Would I go kind of down this negative rabbit hole, so to say, about just fixating on what I didn't like, being annoyed about what happened? Would I really feed that negative train of thought and really kind of descend down into this place of just being upset and irritated and frankly just not having joy? And I really thought about it. I really thought, like, I'm actually bothered by this moment and by this person. So, what do I want to do? How do I honor the fact that I feel this way and also activate? There's something about kind of like turning on the light switch of the power that you and I have in choosing. Viktor Frankl, well, not an official author, he was actually a psychiatrist by trade and was in the World War II. He was a Jew at the time, and he went into the German concentration camps, and he ended up writing this book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he lost everything. They killed his wife. He lost his freedom. And what he talked about was he said two different things that just meant so much to me. One, he said, external man can take away every bit of our freedom in kind of the physical world, but they cannot take away our power to choose. That is ultimately the greatest of all freedoms. So we always have this ability to choose, even when somebody is really irritating us, much less more so, even worse. Viktor Frankl literally having his physical freedom taken from him, where he's stripped naked and walking past gas chambers and wondering when it was his turn to go in. And just the most awful of all human circumstances, he still had the freedom to choose the way that he would see the world, the way that he would treat his fellow mankind, prisoner or guard, and everything in between. He saw and realized in that concentration camp that the greatest freedom that could never be stripped from him is the power to choose. So that's number one, just how great is our power to choose. And then number two, he said, between stimulus and response lies choice. So what that means is every single one of us every day has stimuli coming in towards us, whether that's receiving a text message, whether that's opening our phone and seeing social media, Instagram, whether that's getting a phone call, whether that's receiving an email. Each one of these is a stimuli that's offering an opportunity for us to then respond. And in that space, from the moment we receive that stimuli, then to our response, there's that brief moment of time that really is the time in which we choose. Who are we going to be in our response? We have the stimuli coming in and our response goes out. And so that in-between window is your and my responsibility to really analyze, who do I want to be? Who do I choose to be as I kind of activate this power of response that I have based on choice? And y'all, it's really cool because as we consider this power that each one of us has, we are never really, truly, never really a victim. Like, we always at some point have some semblance, even if it's a sliver of power. Like he said, people were putting him in chains and killing his wife. And yet somehow he was able to recognize that he still had the power of choice. And that's the greatest of all human freedoms. So now if we can kind of agree, all right, we have some semblance of power, we have some semblance of freedom, no matter what, no matter how terrible the circumstances, how can I actually activate this power of choice and bring that into this present moment that I don't like? And how do I choose who do I choose to be? What do I choose to do? But every action we take, every response is ultimately based on who you and I are. And that question of who am I really rests and resides in the question of, well, who do I even want to be in the first place? I grew up so much of my life not choosing. I was very subconsciously effectively living in the box that was set before me. Think about it as whatever your environment was that you grew up in. For me, it was a very Christian conservative environment. And it was kind of like this nice little box with a little bow that the parents and the pastors and the church set before me and my siblings and most of the other kids growing up in that environment, and said, okay, crawl into this box, exist here, follow the rules, do the right thing, and you'll get love and you'll get attention. And if you serve or do favors for people, you'll get even more love and attention. So I learned to kind of gamify the system, because it's not just this petty little thing that all of us want, which is love and belonging. That's actually really core and critical to our human well-being, to survival, to the health of a child. There was a Stanford University study done watching a mother and her baby. And the mom is holding her child and feeding her baby. And she's cooing at the baby and making sweet noises and smiling. And the baby's looking back up at her and not really engaging because he's eating. But then the mom stops. She kind of puts on a stern face, and this is all part of the test. And so then once she puts on that stern face, the baby immediately like detaches from the bottle or the breast and looks at her and starts like getting kind of anxious and starts making anxious noises to get the mother's attention and to start making her smile again. So then the second part of the test is like, okay, now let's go ahead and start smiling and cooing again. So then the woman starts smiling and cooing, and the baby, satisfied and effectively feeling safe in the mother's benevolence and love, it being expressed, it goes back to eating. And then the mother does it again. She kind of gets on the stern face and like disconnects from the baby, and the baby starts exhibiting anxious sounds. Y'all, it is intrinsic to our DNA, to our biology, to want love and connection. There's something like on a mental level that when we are engaging with caregivers at a young age who are inconsistent in the way they give us love, that shapes the way our brain is patterned and wired. So if we feel psychologically unsafe as kids, or psychologically unsafe in romantic relationships today, even friendships, platonic or work relationships, if we feel psychologically unsafe, that is going to show up in the way we act out, in the way that we show up. If somebody gives us love one day and withholds it the next, our nervous system is trying to regulate, well, what's the truth? When can I rely on this person? And if it's not continuously showing a consistent sign in terms of behavior, we start learning default behaviors at a really, really young age for so many of us on how to win people over, how to secure that approval and that love, because our literal survival depends on that. I mean, you see it in a 5-6-month-old baby trying to get the mother just to smile at him. There's something literally in our bones that wants that. So how many of those default behaviors that were developed in childhood are coming out today that we don't even realize we're exhibiting, which is anxiety over trying to get people to love us, anxiousness over trying to feel like we belong and we fit in. And then how many of those times are those default behaviors actually not even in alignment with who we want to be? So what that might look like is, well, everyone else is gossiping, I should gossip too to fit in and belong. But when I really think about it, well, I don't really want to be someone who gossips. Or maybe there's an opportunity to tell a white lie or fib a little bit, or stretch the truth so that you don't get in trouble with, I don't know, your partner or your teacher, whoever it might be. That little stretch of the truth, that little, it's almost a betrayal of our values just for the sake of belonging and connection. Every day we're making a transaction with ourselves. Will we actually make deposits into our bank of our values, or will we take it out of that to try to make deposits into someone else's bank for the sake of connection? The most beautiful type of relationships that exist are when both of us have similar values and similar banking systems. And my deposit into relationship with you is actually also making a deposit into my bank as well, because our relationship is life-giving. We're aligned in values. We want the same things, and we want to help each other be more of who we see each other as we can be. You know, there's something about who we are today and who we can be and the potential that's there that's really exciting. And so, man, I just have found that the best and most meaningful relationships have been with those who love me for who I am today and also are willing to champion me onto who I can be tomorrow. And then the way that we show up in relationships, the emotional relational deposits that I'm making towards relationship with them is effectively putting relational deposits in connection with myself. Because the best relationships, and this is going to be a testament for you and I to look and examine our relationships, which relationships do we feel like we betray ourselves in? And which relationships do we actually walk away more connected with ourselves and more connected with them? And those are just some of those easy questions, but also really important questions for us to be asking ourselves. You know, who are the people that are literally giving me life as I hopefully am giving life to them? And when I say giving life, it's I walk away and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm more happy. I feel like I'm lighter. I feel like I'm more relaxed. I'm more calm. I'm more centered. You know, I feel less anxious. I feel less frustrated. I feel less uneasy with the world or with my job, with the current situation in my life. So when we think about this space between stimulus and response, the power of choice that lies in between those, the fact that we get to choose who we become and ultimately choose who we are. The biggest thing that made a difference for me, there's two things. One, I had to wake up. I had to realize who I was on default. What are those default behaviors? What is the default programming that I learned in childhood to try to get love, get connection, feel like I belong and fit in? What are all of those default things that I'll do, whether it's words or actions or behaviors, that are kind of running on default, on autopilot in my subconscious that I'm not even aware of, I'm not even conscious of, I'm not trying to do that. And once I'm awake to it, do I even want to be doing those things or saying those things in the first place? So that's number one. We have to wake up to who are we on default? What is our autopilot response? What is the program running in the background of our mind that was put there that we kind of inherited because of our relationship with our caregivers in the past? And so with each one of those default behaviors, there's kind of like I like to think of it as Sherlocking. Like we put on our suits and put on Sherlock Holmes like eyeglasses and we go searching for the truth. We have to trace the roots back. And what I mean by that, y'all, is actually looking for the stories and the moments of why are we acting this way in the first place. If I see myself tending to gossip with people that I'm around and that's my default, even though that's not a value I have, why do I do that? And then if I trace the roots all the way down, oh my gosh, when I was 8 years old, I didn't gossip and I wasn't allowed to be on the soccer team because the coach's kids kind of pulled a lot of strings and they actually got to choose who was on the team or not. I'd never tried out for soccer. I don't like soccer, but that's besides the point. I have so many moments that when I do trace the roots, here's a real one. For a lot of my high school life, I was avoiding being in a romantic relationship with a boy because, one, I grew up in a very Christian conservative environment, but also I was like hardcore rejected when I was 12. And that made me like put up all the walls and I never wanted to feel that way again. And so I just was like, I'm not going to let myself be vulnerable to liking a boy because I don't want him to hurt me. But what that did was that led me to not develop any kind of skills in emotional intelligence and relationship dynamics with guys. And then also it encouraged me to get married at 20. And I really didn't have any of that cultivated. And then my husband ended up leaving at when I was 28 years old, and I was married for 8.5 years and did everything I possibly could. But I didn't know the right questions to ask. I didn't know how to vet for my own sake. What does a healthy man look like? What does a healthy relationship look like? I was learning what probably I could have learned in high school probably one of the most intense types of relationships you could possibly have, which is marriage at 20 years old. So there were so many reasons why. One of those is this boy at 12. And so what were the other narratives that I shaped about about the world and about men during that time at 12 years old, when just that little moment happened? And there's so many small little moments in our lives that really shape who we are today. And apart from being really intentional to kind of go Sherlocking and go find the roots and origin stories of them, those are I think of it. So if we think about our mind is running on a program, if we want to really undo a program, we have to get to the very root. When did that program start? So that we can stop that program. And then the second thing, so first we've got to wake up and start paying attention to what are the default behaviors, what are the autopilot actions, and what are the programs. So that's number one. We have to wake up. We have to start being aware of, who am I right now and why am I this way? And then, well, who do I want to be? Who would I choose to be? How do I actually take and activate this power of choice? So now that I'm awake, now that I'm conscious, now I can choose. Now I can choose a better way. We have to create a new target. My therapist, right after my marriage ended, I started attending therapy, and my therapist likened this type of programming to, we have to set a new target so that we can have a 180 change, a lateral change, or we'll do a 360 and repeat history. We will effectively make a whole big circle because we never set a new end destination. So with this power of choice, it's effectively considering, okay, well, what's my new end destination? Who do I want to be? Who do I choose to be? What change do I choose to make from gossip or from acting out of fear? So many of those default behaviors, because they were learned in reaction, so many of them are actually rooted in like a deep-seated fear that either we won't belong, that we're not worthy, that we're not loved, that people will see us as we really are. And so if we really want to undo that and start aiming for something different, we have to get to the root, not just the story, but the thing underneath it is the fear. What fear narrative, what fear story am I telling myself about me? So this is what happened, but this is how I feel about it. So that's where it's so cool to realize that our minds, we've got logic and emotion. We've got EQ and IQ, intellectual intelligence with emotional intelligence. And when they start working together, when we start giving ourselves permission to look at, okay, this is logically what happened, and this is emotionally how I felt, both together shape us. But we can't only look at one or the other. We have to look at both to get a whole picture of what it is that is kind of the reality of the moment or the impact. And so with this new target that we're considering, it's like, okay, well, what are the actions? What tangibly is this going to look like in action, logically, let's say, and then the emotion. What's the new way of feeling? So if I don't want to feel fear, that means I probably actually need to program my mind rooted in love, not out of fear that I won't belong, or not out of fear that I'm not worthy, but out of a sense of confidence and love for myself and for somebody else. And so where does that even come from? And this whole question of, how do I really start believing that I'm worthy? We have to have that baseline. We have to have something really firm to stand on, because when the waves come and knock us over, whether it's a wave of grief or a wave of losing a job or a wave of being rejected at 12 years old, whatever your wave is, whatever my wave is, everything that we do in terms of understanding what has led us and brought us to this place, and then everything we do from here on out to set a firm foundation in terms of a new target of choosing, I choose to cultivate this value system. I choose to cultivate this character trait or this personality aspect even. All of those serve as the foundation that we stand on when something horrific happens and threatens to knock us over. That's the foundation that we come back and stand on. And so this question of am I worthy, that was a really big one. And not even am I worthy, but am I even lovable to begin with? When my husband left, I really had to ask this question, am I going to rest on and depend on who he said I was? Or am I going to believe that I am created in the image of someone divinely beautiful that is the ultimate creator, and I am made with intention and with purpose, and I am not a mistake, I am not an accident, and that I am here for a reason? Having those discussions with ourselves is really, really important, because other people can tell you and I any nice thing, but if we don't believe it for ourselves, it does not really matter that much what other people say. And when we play this game of, and it is, in one sense, it is a game. So bear with me here. This game of, oh, well, they said this about me, or they hurt me in this way. The reason why so often that it hurts so much is because we secretly believe it for ourselves. Every time someone has hurt me, it's really just holding up a mirror and I'm like, yeah, I thought I was this way, and you're proving it. And there's like this other part of us that really needs to come to battle and fight for the fear. There's like this fear part of us that's there from childhood that's really acting in attempts to protect you and me. This fear, this protector in us is trying to keep us safe, but that doesn't mean that it's true. And so if we can allow for fear to coexist with love, and for love to be the greater and louder voice. And love has to be predicated in truth. So often fear isn't. So often fear is, again, reactive, where truth is proactive. It's true no matter what. It's true no matter what other people say. So when I had to look at my life and say, okay, am I going to choose to believe my husband, or am I going to choose to believe someone and something so much bigger than who he is? And so that's what I had to choose. I had to choose between, effectively, man, who's finite, and God, who is infinite. And who do I choose to believe? And there's so many different, beautiful, meaningful stories around kind of the God story, right? Like, man, the value you and I bring to this world, which is priceless. Someone asked me the other day, I was hosting the Knowing workshop, and they were just like, how do you how do you know that you're worthy? And there's something about it where I actually have come to know that I'm worthy by coming to know God. And I've also come to know God by coming to know me, because we're made as a direct reflection of him. We are like our creator. So if we are completely shut out and shut off from ourselves, we can only access who God is to such a varying degree. But if we're willing to go deep, if we're willing to come to know the logic and the emotion, all of the parts that make us us, man, we're going to come to know God so much more. And then we get to say, all right, then who do I want to be? Given that I believe as a part of my foundation that I am loved, that I am worthy, that I am accepted, that I am wanted. Wanted is a big one for me. It really has been like a fear point for me of not being wanted, not being chosen. So each one of us has a core fear that all of those other narratives play on. So once we establish our core foundation, then we get to say, okay, who do I want to be on top of that? Now we get to create something new. And one of the best and my most favorite questions is, well, who do you admire? Who do you really, really love? It could be a comedian, it could be a fictional character, it could be someone alive or dead, it could be your mother, it could be anyone. Why? And then the question is, well, why do you love them? Why are you drawn to them? Why do you respect them? What values that are in you are actually being kind of like brought forth? It's like it's calling out of you. Sometimes when we see something beautiful or we experience someone inspiring, there's something in us that awakens. Remember, the first part is we have to wake up. We have to wake up to kind of the status quo of who we are, and then do the digging, the Sherlocking to find the root origin story of why. We have to look at the emotion and the logic. And then same thing for if we want to see real change, Well, who are the people that are kind of beacons of light, of the desire in our hearts that are awakened when we experience them? And it could be just, yes, a person, but also an experience of beauty that we have that really can awaken us. And then again, the question's why? What is it in you that's coming alive as you're experiencing that person, place, or thing? And as we start to really kind of have this like unfolding, it's like a beautiful flower unfolding that is the experience of coming to know who we are. But we have to be patient. We have to be curious, because so long as we're judgmental, man, that curiosity really helps us not be judgmental. Because if we are judgmental, it's kind of like judgment throws a cloak over this beautiful flower that's slowly starting to open up. And judgment like brings darkness where otherwise curiosity brings light. And we then get to see, the hidden parts and the nooks and the crannies around our soul and about us that otherwise we wouldn't see, because judgment really does cast a pretty large shadow, and that's where fear lies. So with that, y'all, we get the power. We get to choose who we are. We get to choose who we want to be. And we're not victims. Viktor Frankl, out of everyone in the entire world, these folks who are in Auschwitz, if they get to recognize that the greatest human freedom that's possible is the ability to choose the lens through which we view the world, then we surely do too. So with that, thank you so much for